Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 1 to 4 player Puzzle Strike 2, designed by David Sirlin and published by Sirlin Games, who helped sponsor this video. 10 years ago, I released a tutorial for Puzzle Strike, and here we are a decade later with a sequel that plays very differently, but is inspired by the same core concepts as the original. But you know what this game never had? A scepter! We'll talk about this in a moment, but for now, join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, put this community bank board in the center of the play area. Then find the cards labeled as wounds here at the top and set them face up into the space for them here. Nearby, I also put the gems sorted into the included trays, along with these action and gem tokens. The game comes with 2 bank decks, Grand Melee and Birthday Bash. When playing, you only ever use one of these, and for your first game, they recommend using Grand Melee, so we'll return the other one to the box. You can also set aside this deck title card, as you won't use this during the game. If you ever accidentally get your bank decks mixed together, check the symbols found in their bottom left corner. All the Grand Melee cards show this fist, and the Birthday Bash cards have a present. Now shuffle your bank deck and set it face down into this space of the board. Then deal 5 cards face up into the spaces for them here to its left. We next need to add these Ante cards to the bank deck. First, collect a number of cards equal to 4 times the number of players. In this video, we'll pretend we have 2 players, so that means we collect 8 cards. We then slide one of the Ante cards under that pile. Then collect the same number of cards again, so 8 more cards in this case, and put another Ante under those. Then you place both stacks back on top of the deck. Now each player collects and puts a pair of these boards in front of themselves, adding 2 gem tokens from the supply into this area here, and collecting 3 action tokens from the supply to put in this area. There are 10 possible characters you can play as, and each character has 3 cards showing their name at the bottom. Have every player pick a character, take the related cards, and then return all of the rest of the characters back to the box. Then each player collects 2 swaps, 2 crash gems, 2 basic blocks, and 1 skip ahead. These are called starting cards, and to help distinguish them from the others, you'll find a white dot in their top left-hand corner. Each player now takes their 7 starting and 3 character cards and shuffles them together into a face-down deck they'll set onto their player board here, drawing 5 of the cards for their opening hand. You can always look at your own cards, but keep them a secret from the other players. Now, pick someone randomly to be the first player. Each other player now collects one of these diamonds and sets it onto this space of their board. The first player may not get a diamond, but they do get this scepter, and if you press the button on its side, it lights up. And each time you press the button, it will change the way it lights up until it turns off. And that's the setup. In Puzzle Strike 2, players will be collecting and playing cards that will direct colored gems at their opponents. If a player gets too many gems, they may bust and lose if they can't find a way to get rid of them. On the other hand, having gems can help unlock special abilities for you, so it's all about maintaining a careful balance. I think one of the ways I can help you understand the rules best is if I give you a quick visual example of what I'm talking about. Over the course of the game, your opponent will be sending tokens to this area of your board. Then on your turn, these will turn into gems that fall into the column here. If you end your turn with gems above this level, you lose. This means you'll have to perform actions during your turn to play cards that will help you remove gems from here, which will then fill up the bars on this area of your board, which might unlock special abilities, but will also send tokens over to your opponent, who will have to deal with them on their turn. The game is played over a series of turns, starting with the first player and then going in clockwise order around and around the table. And on your turn, you'll resolve 5 phases, starting with the Ante Phase. To understand this phase, it helps to understand that most cards in the game come in one of 4 different colors: blue, pink, green, and purple, as shown by their border. These colors also match the 4 types of gems that come in the game. There are also wounds, but these don't count as being one of the 4 main colors. During the Ante Phase, first check the color of the card in the 5th space of the community board, labeled as the Ante space. As you'll be reminded of right here on that card, you must now collect 2 gems from the supply that match that card's color and then add them to your gem pile. Your gem pile is represented by this column on your player board, and it starts empty, but as gems are added to it, they drop in from the opening here and fall to the bottom. Now, because both of these gems are the same color, it doesn't matter what order we drop them in, but in most cases, the order will matter, as we'll see. And that's the Ante Phase. Now we move on to the Action Phase. I should point out you'll find the phases of your turn summarized here on your player board, and as it tells us, during this phase we'll have 3 actions represented by these tokens, which we'll use to let us play cards from our hand. Every card in the game has a cost in actions to play it, shown in its top left-hand corner. For example, this costs 1 action and this costs 3. To play a card, you set it face up in front of you and pay its cost by moving the required number of actions from your board to the card itself. This will help remind you of how many actions you have left to spend this phase. Some cards, like this one, have a 0 action cost, so playing this wouldn't use up any of my action tokens. Either way, after choosing and playing a card, you resolve any effects it has printed in this area. There are a variety of effects you'll find on the cards, and later we'll go over the various symbols so you can understand them. For now, it's enough to know that after resolving a card, you can play another until you've run out of cards in your hand, spent all of your action tokens, or simply don't want to play anything else. As you play and resolve cards, keep them face up in front of you. I like to have mine spread out, but you can also stack them in the middle of your player board if you prefer. At any point during your action phase, even before you take any actions at all, if you have any tokens in this incoming area, these are known as your incoming gems, and you can choose to drop them. This doesn't cost an action. You'll just convert these tokens into actual gems from the supply and then add them to your gem pile here. Once you start dropping gems, you must add as many of them as you have space for. We couldn't drop just one of these and then stop. We have room for both, so we drop each of them. To illustrate how this works, let's pretend we have several incoming gems. We'll say 7. By the way, these tokens are double-sided, so if you want to save some room, you can flip over a single, which counts as 3 tokens. When incoming gems drop, they turn into physical gems based on the colors of cards in the community bank row. For example, the first gem to drop will be blue because the first card in the bank is blue. The next gem to drop will be green because this is green, the next will be blue, and so on. It can help to understand how gems will drop by visualizing the community bank this way. The first 5 gems to drop into your pile will fall directly into it, stacked in the same way these colors are here. First blue, then green, blue again, pink, and then blue. If you have more than 5 gems incoming like we do here, then the next gems get their colors by going back to the start of the bank. That means our 6th gem falls into our pile as blue, and our 7th will be green. As the real gems drop into your pile, remove the related tokens from your board and return them to the supply. It's rare to run out of gems, but if it happens while playing, just use a suitable replacement. Now let's say we played this card next. As a part of its effect, it adds 2 to our incoming zone, meaning we'd add 2 tokens here. Again, we'll decide when we want to drop these into our gem pile, but when we do, we start over from the leftmost space of the row again. So these 2 would drop in as blue and then green. In other words, we don't have to remember where we left off the last time we dropped gems. We just always start over from the leftmost space again. Remember, when you decide to drop incoming gems, you must drop as many as will fit into your gem pile. You can't hold any back. The exception is if you run out of room. Let's say for a moment our board looked like this and we were dropping 5 incoming gems but only had room for 2. We could still start a drop, but we'd convert only 2 gems and leave the rest as tokens. We'll see how gems can be removed from your pile later, but if we were able to remove some, these other gems wouldn't automatically drop in. We would still decide when we want to drop them. Gems in your pile can give you various benefits, as we'll see, but if your pile gets too full, it can be a problem. At the end of your turn, if you have more than 10 gems in your pile, which is marked by this line, then you'll bust and lose the game. So you'll want to ensure that by the end of your turn, your gems aren't above this level. But here's the catch. At the very end of your action phase, any incoming gems that you didn't drop earlier must drop now, which could cause you to bust at the end of your turn. So while playing, you'll want to make sure your gem pile doesn't overfill, while also trying to overload your opponent's gem pile. And you can help make this happen through the cards that you play during your action phase. So let's go back to the table and learn how all the various effects work. Let's start with the crash effect, which is resolved when you play a card with this symbol. In many ways, this effect is the heart of the game, as it will both help you get rid of gems in your pile, but also send them to an opponent. To help with these examples, I'm going to create various patterns in my gem pile like you might see during the game. To resolve a crash, move the top gem of your pile into the leftmost empty matching colored space of your super move meters located here. Then add a single gem token from the supply to your opponent's incoming gems area. These will stay here until it's their turn, and then they will have to deal with all the tokens that have accumulated there, just like we have to resolve our incoming gems during our turn. So when you resolve a crash symbol, it moves the top gem in your pile to the matching colored meter on your board, and at the same time sends a gem token to your opponent. Filling up your meters is good, and we'll see why a little later. For now, though, let's learn how we can make a crash even better. I said a crash only removes your top gem, which is true unless the gems adjacent to it and each other are the same color. So if I resolve a crash now, it affects this top blue gem and all blue gems directly beneath it until I get to a new color. So in this case, I'd move all 3 of these blue gems to my blue super move meter, and then, since I crashed 3 gems, I'd collect a 3 gem token to add to my opponent's gem pile. But that's not all. As long as you crashed at least 2 gems, you check the bonus value showing beside the highest gem in that crashed group. This is known as the height bonus. In our case, the highest blue gem was beside the +2 section, and that means you send that many extra gem tokens to your opponent. These bonus gems do not get added to your super moves meter. So with this crash, we've added 3 blue gems to our super moves meter, and a total of 5 gem tokens would be added to our opponent's incoming area for them to deal with on their turn. Just remember, you only get this bonus if you crash at least 2 gems at once. If I resolve the crash now, I'd only send a single gem token to my opponent's incoming area. I wouldn't get the bonus. So while you don't want to overfill your gem pile, the higher it is, the greater the height bonus when crashing. Sometimes a crash effect is said to be unblockable. If so, perform the crash as usual, but any tokens you would normally send to your opponent's incoming area are instead immediately converted into gems based, as usual, on the colors of the community bank. So let's say we crashed these 3 gems, and it was an unblockable crash. We would put these gems into our super move meter as normal, and then because of the bonus, 5 incoming gems would normally go to our opponent, but instead we'll be sending 5 gems directly into their gem pile. First blue, then green, then blue, then pink, then blue, just like we see here in the community row. And remember, you only check to see if you bust at the end of your turn. Having more than 10 gems in your pile any other time in the game is fine. Well, it means things are getting risky for you, but you've still got time to deal with it. This is a card I pulled from the Happy Birthday card bank deck. And if you ever see a deep crash symbol like these, they work just like a crash, except you can use it on any gem in your pile, not just the top one. So I could pick this pink gem, and it, along with this adjacent pink gem, would go to my meter. And then that number of tokens would be crashed to my opponent. When you perform a deep crash, you look at the position that the topmost gem of that group was in to determine how many bonus gems, if any, are sent to your opponent. So in this case, 1 more. Also, when you crash gems out of the center of your pile, slide down any above it. With crashes understood, let's look at some other effects. This is the swap symbol. It lets you switch the position of any two adjacent gems in your pile. And this card lets you do this up to 2 times. Many cards will have several symbols and effects on them, and normally you must resolve all the effects that you see on a card in order from left to right, top to bottom. But swaps are always optional. Let's say we did want to do 2 swaps. I might switch the position of these 2 gems and then these 2 gems, because now I've set myself up for a better crash later. This symbol represents a deep swap, and like a regular swap, resolving this is always optional. A deep swap lets you switch the position of any 2 gems in your pile, even if they aren't adjacent. This green symbol causes you to draw a card from your deck, in this case, 2, while the red symbol requires you to discard cards. Anytime you have to discard, place those chosen cards face up into this area of your player board. And if you would ever need to draw a card and you have none in your deck, at that point only, pick up your discard pile, not including any cards face up in front of you, and shuffle it into a new draw deck. Then after, continue drawing any cards you're still owed. Moving on, when you see a shield with a value in the center, this is known as a block symbol. When you play one of these, remove that value in gem tokens from your incoming area, in this case 4. If you have fewer than 4, you can still play this card, you would just remove as many of the tokens as you have. When you see these symbols, collect that number of action tokens from the supply and add them to your board. These are temporary extra actions you'll get to use during this action phase. Some cards will show this trash symbol, and unless it says otherwise, this means you must trash the card after resolving it. A trashed card goes into this trash slot of the board here. In the Birthday Bash deck, you'll find this present symbol. For each one of these, you must draw a card from the top of your deck and then play it, ignoring its action cost. So if I was resolving the first of these present symbols and I drew this crash, this normally costs 2 actions, but I would now just resolve it for free. Sometimes an effect will tell you to gain a wound, or in this case, gain 2 wounds. If so, collect them from this pile, and anytime you gain a card, you always put it straight into your discard pile unless you're told otherwise. Wounds have no abilities, which means when you draw them, you're adding something useless to your hand. So you usually don't want these. Some cards are known as creatures, as indicated here. When these are played, rather than resolving their effect, you put them into this space of your board. Creatures provide an ongoing effect you'll have access to for as long as you have the creature. If you play a new creature later, discard the old one and set the new one in its place. A creature is also removed if your opponent crashes at least as many gems of the value and color shown here. Now these have to be actual gems crashed from their gem pile, not counting any height bonuses. So if your opponent crashed at least 2 pink gems, you would have to discard this creature. There are some other symbols and effects left to learn, but they'll make more sense once we know a few more of the rules, so we'll come back and cover them later. Now though, let's talk about these super moves. I had mentioned that when you crash gems, these super move meters will fill up, and when one is completely filled, it becomes activated and you resolve its special effect. That said, if one gets filled while resolving the symbols on a card, finish resolving the card completely and then resolve any super moves that got activated. For example, if I played this card, which lets me crash twice, and after the first crash, I filled up one of my super moves, I'd first complete the second crash, then gain 2 wounds, and then resolve the super move. Each of these moves has its own effect, so let's go through them. The purple super move gives you Overload, and this says that your opponent must now immediately drop a blue, and then a pink, and then a green gem into their gem pile. And if they don't have room for any of those gems, turn them into incoming gem tokens instead. The Purify super move lets you destroy all gems of a color that you choose from your gem pile. Now, destroying is different than crashing. When destroying, nothing goes to your super moves or your opponent's board. So let's say I chose to destroy my purple gems. I would remove these and return them to the supply, and then drop all of my other gems to fill in the empty spaces. When you complete an Energize super move, First, gain 2 temporary action tokens from the supply that you'll be able to use this turn, and then draw 2 cards from your deck. And then finally, when you activate Trickshot, pick one of the cards face up in this row to take into your hand for free, where you may then play it for free during your turn. Anytime a card is removed from this row, always immediately slide any cards to the left as necessary to close the gap, and then draw a new card to set into this rightmost space. The card you take with Trickshot does not have to be played right away, and you can play it at any point during your turn. So you may want to set it face up in front of yourself, turned sideways, as a reminder that it hasn't been played yet, but can be played later. When you're ready to play it, turn it upright, resolve its effect, and don't worry about paying its cost. You treat this as if it was free to play. Because of certain effects, it's possible that one or more of your super moves may activate on your opponent's turn. If so, you still get the benefit right away. If Energize is activated, collect the extra action tokens and cards, but you won't use them until your turn. With Trickshot, you put the bank card into your hand right away, even though it's not your turn, but you can't play it until your action phase. If you ever have more than one super move row that is full at the same time, you activate them in order from top to bottom. And that's how the meters work. After resolving a meter's effect, you then return all of the gems on it back to the supply. And if you ever get to add more gems to a meter than it can hold, for example, let's say we had just crashed these 5 blue gems. First, you fill the meter as full as you can, you resolve its effect, then remove the gems in its row, and then continue filling it with the remaining gems that you crashed. This might even allow you to resolve the move once more right away if that fully fills the meter again. Now, in addition to playing cards and resolving super moves, there's one other option you have during the action phase. A player with a diamond on their board can use it to activate any one of their super moves. It doesn't cost an action to do this, you don't need any gems in that row, and you don't spend any gems that might have already been there. Just resolve the super move effect and return the diamond to the box. You can only use your diamond once during the game. And with that, we've covered everything you need to know to resolve your action phase. When you've taken as many actions as you can or wish to, put all of the cards that you played this turn into your discard pile. Then place 3 action tokens back on your board, returning any extras you may have back to the supply. At the end of your action phase, if you have any incoming gems, then you must drop them at this time. If you can't fit all of the incoming gems into your gem pile, then those you will still leave in the incoming area, but this likely means you're going to bust at the end of your turn. Now we move on to the buy phase of your turn. Here, you must take one face-up card from this row and add it to your discard pile. Now, this is not optional. You must buy one card, but at most, you can only buy a single card during this phase. The cost to purchase a card is shown here directly beneath it, so the 2 cards in this space are free to buy. But if you take one from these 3 spaces, you move the related number of gem tokens under it from the supply to your incoming area. For example, if I purchased this card, I would then add 2 incoming gems to this area of my board. But remember, these won't drop into your gem pile until your next action phase. Also, as soon as a card is taken from this row, move the cards to the left to fill in any gap and draw a new card to replace it. With the buy action understood, I can now explain a few other symbols you might find on cards played during the action phase. This effect reduces your cost during the buy phase by the amount shown to a minimum of 0, while this symbol increases your buy cost by the related amount. So if I had played this card during my action phase, which increases my buy cost by 2, if I then wanted to take this card, I'd have to add 2 gem tokens to my incoming area, or if I took this one, I would have to add 4. Finally, we have this top symbol. During the action phase, when you resolve this top effect, you take any one of the 5 face-up cards to place onto your deck face down. Now this isn't a buy, so you don't pay any cost for it. It's free to take, but as usual, you move the cards and refill the empty space. And you still get your normal buy as usual during the buy phase. With that, we've now gone over all of the symbols that you'll encounter, and that should give you enough information to be able to interpret any cards you come across in the game. With that in mind, let's go back to resolving the phases of your turn. We had finished explaining the buy phase, and after that you move on to the draw phase. Here, you'll discard everything still in your hand and then draw 5 cards from your deck, which I've done here. Plus, you draw additional cards equal to your current hype bonus. So in this case, 1 extra card. Now remember, if you run out of cards when you need to draw more, stop and reshuffle your discard pile into a new deck and then keep drawing as necessary. The draw phase is the very last phase of a player's turn, and then the next player in clockwise order takes their turn. Now I know many of you have been sitting very patiently waiting and wondering, Rodney, when are you going to talk about the Scepter of Power? Well, it's time. To understand how this works and its impact on the game, I first needed to explain a majority of the rules, which I've now done. So let's learn about this now. When you're holding the scepter, at the end of each other player's turn, in other words, at the end of any turn other than your own, as you're reminded of here, you have a command decision to make. Either power up or yield. If you choose to power up, add 1 of each type of gem to each of your 4 super move meters. Or, instead of powering up, you yield the scepter, giving it to the player whose turn just ended. Now you might be thinking, why would you ever give up the Scepter of Power when you could instead keep it and power up your super moves? Well, the scepter is powerful, but it's also dangerous. First, the player who holds the scepter must always drop any incoming gem tokens they have into their gem pile at the very start of their action phase. Remember, normally you can drop these at any point during your action phase, which allows you to play some cards first. And that's quite a big deal, because before your action phase, remember, you always ante some matching gems into your pile. This means you might be able to crash at least 2 of the gems out and get their hype bonus when you do this before dropping any other gem tokens in. However, the person holding the scepter must drop their gems in before any cards are played, which might create a more challenging pattern to deal with. And as usual, if your gem pile fills up, any remaining gems stay in your incoming area, and you can then drop those as normal at any point you choose during your action phase. But don't forget, you must still drop any here at the end of your action phase. And that's not all. Any blocks you play while you hold the scepter are ignored. Normally when you play a block, this will remove that many gem tokens from this area, but not anymore. You can still play cards that show a block symbol to gain their other benefits, but the block itself is treated as if the value is 0. It's not all bad though. While you hold the scepter, anytime you crash gems, you crash them at all of your opponents. So in a 3-player game, if I crashed 3 gems and they had a hype bonus of 2, I would still only send 3 of those gems to my meters. But then I would send 5 incoming gems to each of the other players. Remember, crashed gems can also remove creatures. So if I had 2 opponents that had creatures that could be removed by the same color of gems that I had crashed, I could potentially knock out more than 1 creature with a single attack. While you're holding the scepter, any effect that targets an opponent targets all the other players. On the other hand, if you don't have the scepter, then your opponent is always the player who is holding the scepter. So in a 3-player game, if I have the scepter and the player to my left crashes gems, they will only target me, not the other player at the table. This isn't just limited to crashing gems either. If the scepter holder plays an effect like we see here that tells an opponent to put a wound on top of their deck, that causes all other players to put a wound on top of their deck. And if a non-scepter holder were to play this, only the scepter holder would put a wound on their deck. So the scepter is powerful, but it can be risky to hang on to it for too long. And remember, the command decision to either power up or give the scepter to another player is made at the end of each other player's turn, not at the end of your own. So at the end of my turn, if I'm holding the scepter, I won't make a command decision. But at the end of the next player's turn, I will, either powering up or yielding the scepter to them, and then the next player goes, which in a 2-player game would be me. We now know most of the rules, but remember, during the setup we buried 2 of these Ante Up cards in the bank deck. As soon as one of these would enter the community row, instead tuck it directly under the 5th card slot. Then draw a new card to add into the open space. On the following and all other turns after this has been added to the board, instead of adding just 2 gems during your Ante Up phase, you'll now add 1 more. So during the next player's Ante Up phase, they would add 3 blue gems to their gem pile. As soon as this is revealed, each player also gains 1 permanent action for all future turns. So go ahead and add another one of these to your board. When the next Ante Up card is drawn in the future, also tuck it under here as well. And now when you Ante Up, you'll add a total of 4 gems to your gem pile. And every player now has 1 extra action token to use on all future turns. In this way, as the game goes on, it also accelerates, with more gems being anteed and more actions for the players to take. Eventually, someone will end their turn with more than 10 gems in their gem pile, and when this happens in a 2-player game, they bust and their opponent wins. If you have 3 or 4 players, as soon as someone busts, they lose and are out of the game, but the rest of the players enter what is known as the grand finale. Here, the player holding the scepter loses it. No one may claim it for the rest of the game. Now find the grand finale player with the highest number of incoming gems and have every other player set their incoming gems to the same value by collecting extra tokens as necessary. So in this case, this player has 13 gems, and now this player does as well. If that highest incoming gem value happens to be less than 10 plus 5 for each Ante Up card already revealed so far, then all players collect gems until they have that value instead. So 15 in this case. Every remaining player now takes 1 final turn, and all of the gems they crash or would ante to another player are instead sent to a personal score pile they'll keep near the scepter. They aren't crashing gems at the other players, just at the scepter. Players will also skip the buy and command decision during their final turns and ignore any ante cards that get revealed from the deck. If a player busts during the grand finale, the other players keep going until everyone has had their 1 turn. The player who sent the most gems into their score pile beside the scepter without busting is declared the winner. And if everyone busted, whoever sent the most gems wins. I should also mention, in a 2-player game, if the bank deck is ever empty and you need to draw a card from it during your turn, you just bust and lose. In a 3 or 4-player game, if the deck runs out and you need to draw, you also bust and are out of the game, but then you shuffle all of the bank cards from the trash pile into a new draw deck, and the remaining players play a grand finale as described previously. The game also comes with rules for solo and cooperative play, but I'll leave those for you to discover on your own. There are also a couple of helpful pages for clarifying rules and providing tips, and a couple of pages for frequently asked questions you can refer to when playing if any questions come up. The back of the rulebook is also especially helpful because it provides a very thorough player aid detailing many of the rules that I discussed here in this video. And there's also an expansion that you can pick up separately with 4 new bank decks and 10 additional characters. But otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Puzzle Strike 2. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.